Whitelaw Reid simply asked, "How much do you need?" and pledged it. By 1915, Sunderland House had become a meeting ground for the war's invisible architects. Her home for prisoners' wives became a maternity annex, 18 beds for unwed mothers, girls carrying more than shame. One of them wept beside her newborn. Her husband, a black American, had left for the front. The baby's pale skin terrified her. A nurse tried to reassure her. Newborns often look pale at birth. His colour will come. But the fear of judgment, abandonment, disbelief remained. In 1916, Consuelo gave the priestly lecture on infant mortality. She did not speak in abstractions. She began with a stark truth. 1 in every 8 children born in Britain dies before their first birthday. In London's poorest boroughs, the toll was worse. Disease ran rampant. Babies were wrapped in newspaper for warmth. Clinics turned away the unmarried. And Consuelo named what others would not: venereal disease, malnutrition, shame. Some in the audience stood and left. The Times called her brave. She launched the Jewel Fund. Give a jewel to save a baby's life. Cartier opened its vaults. Tiaras, tin lockets, wedding bands, Lloyd George's scarf pins sold twice. £50,000 poured in, but money, she learned, was never enough. For every maternity bed she opened, 10 more were needed. For every child she saved, another slipped through the cracks. Charity could soothe but not cure, and the disease was structural. Policies that punished, laws that excluded, lives made invisible. If she wanted to change the rules, she'd need to sit in the room where the rules were written. Politics came next. The major parties offered women no real seat. So she helped found the Women's Municipal Party. No whip, no machine, just women. Widowed, titled, determined. Tired of waiting for someone else's permission, Alva urged her forward. Not as ornament, she said, but as instrument. In 1917, Consuelo ran for London County Council in North Southwark. They deliberated, then chose her. She won again in 1919. Children sang in the streets. Vote, vote, vote for Mrs. Marlborough. Inside the council, she worked on housing, heat, education. She walked the slums and invited the Prince of Wales to join her. He did. "I wish my mother wore hats like yours," he said. But he listened. A disgruntled driver, dismissed for poor performance, began spreading rumours that she owned slum tenements. It was a lie, but damaging. She answered it quietly. No denials, no scandal, just a tram ride to her next public meeting, refusing to stand above those she served. One night, she noticed a man trailing her down a darkened street. Her heart pounded, her pace quickened. So did his. But at her next gathering, when she rose to speak, he stood at the back and applauded. A supporter, it turned out. He had only wanted to ensure she got home safe. Even courage, it seemed, could be mistaken for risk. "You realise," Winston Churchill told her over lunch at the Savoy, "that you're the first American to sit on a British governing body since we rather rudely ejected your lot in 1776. Not rudely," she smiled. "Justifiably." "Careful, cousin," he winked. "That's treasonous talk." "Only if you still consider me British," she replied. "I'm becoming more American every day." "Nonsense," he grinned. "We'll keep the good ones." Sunderland House had grown cold. No heat, no privacy. 10 housemaids quit. One muttered on her way out, "I thought this was a house. It's a town hall." In 1918, she handed it over. The Inter-Allied Council took possession. Arthur Balfour sent thanks. Paul Cravath took her rooms. Her sons were scattered across the front. Blandford rode with the cavalry in France. Ivor, barred from combat, served in logistics. Her brothers crossed the Atlantic in navy blue. She wrote them all daily, faithfully, never knowing which letter might be the last. Crowhurst took in wounded officers. Its halls echoed with crutches, coughs, and quiet grief. Her parlour became a ward, her garden a vegetable patch. On November 11th, 1918, the siren sounded across London, not in warning, but in wonder. Peace. She stood on the balcony of the county council building and looked out on a city that had bled for 4 years. Crowds surged, flags unfurled, the air trembled with hymns, with joy, with release. Then the French marched past, shrunken in number, solemn in step. She did not cheer. She wept for Paris, for Verdun, for the boys who did not return, and for the world they left behind. Peace brought no rest. The headlines shifted. The sirens fell silent, but the broken world remained. Slums still festered. Mothers still begged for blankets. Laws still lagged behind the lives they governed. Exhausted in body and spirit, Consuelo withdrew to Alva's villa among citrus groves and Mediterranean light. Alva was older now, slower, but no less certain. They sat in the garden, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing letters and wounds. Years of distance and dominance softened into something like tenderness, and in that quiet reconciliation, Consuelo allowed herself, finally, to rest. In 1920, Blandford married Lady Mary Cadogan, daughter of the 5th Earl Cadogan. The wedding took place at St. Margaret's, Westminster, beneath a pale winter sun. The pews were filled with titled names and the shattered remnants of a generation. Consuelo watched her son, the future Duke, stand at the altar, polished, poised, and heartbreakingly young. She blessed the match, but as Mary took her son's arm, a shadow passed, faint, familiar. A girl in white, a door quietly closing. Then came the letter. It arrived in 1921. Brief, elegant, predictable. Sonny wanted a divorce. Gladys would not be a mistress. She would be a duchess. There was no courtroom scene, no scandal in the papers. The divorce was quietly obtained in Paris. Mutual consent, no accusations, no counterclaims. The headlines were courteous. Duke and Duchess part amicably. She moved to a smaller house with ivy on the walls and sunlight in the kitchen. No staff waited in doorways. No footman flanked the stairs. She learned to make her own tea. She sat by the fire in her slippers. And one morning she realized she had not heard her name announced in weeks, and no one had bowed. No one had asked her to smile. No one had called her the Duchess of Marlborough. They had called her Consuelo. Sonny married Gladys Deacon that summer. There was no church wedding, no photographs, just a line in the Times. She read it once, then went for a walk. The sun was warm. The air carried the smell of wet grass and stone. And for the first time in decades, she walked with no destination, no duty, no script. She had been traded for a title. Now she had given it back, and she did not miss it. Unlike your warm, cozy bed now, where you make your own choices, she had spent most of her life living by others' rules, smiling when told, speaking when permitted. But now, at last, she was beginning to find the one thing that had eluded her from the start: freedom. 1920 was shadowed by sorrow. Her father, gravely ill, died with quiet dignity. Consuelo was with him to the end. He bore his suffering without complaint, and when the Duc de Gramont sent condolences on behalf of the French Jockey Club, his words were simple: his death will be a great loss to the French racing world. Letters arrived from every corner: aristocrats, jockeys, stable hands, surgeons. The The Paris clinic he had funded mourned deeply. Consuelo had often helped there alongside her stepmother. Now she helped plan the burial. He was laid to rest in the family vault on Staten Island. In the house, where once children had peered down on balls from the upstairs gallery, hymns now echoed through closed doors. She spent long, still weeks in her mother's medieval-style home on Long Island. Alva had helped win the vote. She had become president of the National Woman's Party, but she was alone. Consuelo prepared to begin again. She sold Sunderland House, gave Portman Square to her son, released Crowhurst. Each home carried its own memory, each farewell its own grief, but she knew it was time. Her sons were grown, Blandford happily married, Ivor studying at Oxford. She had given them stability. Now she needed freedom. She moved into the Paris house her father had given her, but his death had ended the companionship she had hoped for. Alva joined her there, and with her Aunt Jenny, they built something soft and quiet. Waiting for the final steps of divorce, Consuelo leased a villa near Aza. She travelled often to England, but did not expect to fall in love. On July 4th, 1921, she married Jacques Balsan in the Chapel Royal of the Savoy at 9 a.m. to avoid reporters. This was quieter, warmer. They followed with a civil ceremony. Colonel George Harvey, American ambassador, and General Cornelius Vanderbilt stood as witnesses. There was no coronet, no throne, but there was peace. Jacques Balsan was beloved everywhere. Kind, clever, brave. Children loved him. So did generals, gardeners, and grand dames. He was, she realised, not a man who needed to impress, but one who knew how to care. Jacques was a pilot, but before planes, he flew balloons. In 1899, he floated from France to Russia, crashing in Prussia and landing at the estate of Baron von Bandemer. He was greeted politely, shown a monument to the French defeat at Sedan, and sent on his way. He bought his first airplane in 1909 and earned pilot license number 18. In Morocco, he flew reconnaissance against the Moors, risking capture and torture. In 1913, he received the Legion of Honor. In World War I, he scouted during the First Battle of the Marne. Later, with Consuelo's father and Dr. Gros, he helped establish the Lafayette Escadrille, precursor to the American Air Force. They had met years before when she was still a newlywed and he a dashing guest at Blenheim. During the war, he had once sent her a postcard before a bombing run. I did not expect to return. Now he had. Unlike the Duke, who saw her as an ornament, Jacques saw her as a partner. What would you like to do? He asked her one morning over breakfast. A question so simple, yet so revolutionary that she nearly dropped her cup. Do? She repeated. Yes, he smiled. With your life. With our life. What would you like to create? No one, not her mother, not her ex-husband, not society, had ever asked. She thought for a moment, then smiled back. Everything. Their marriage was not recognised by the Catholic Church. In France, where Catholicism ruled society, divorce was rare and remarriage without annulment forbidden. Jacques' family, devout and bound to tradition, could not receive her. She asked him not to break with them. She would wait. When in 1926 Marlborough sought his own annulment, the moment came. With the help of her mother and old governess, she petitioned Rome. Her lawyer, Sir Charles Russell, warned that only proof of coercion would suffice. Alva consented as a way to apologise for that action so long ago. She admitted she had forced her daughter unwillingly to marry. The Vatican ruled in Consuelo's favour. No bribes had passed, only courage and truth. Now married in the church, Consuelo was welcomed into the Balsan family. At the chateau in Chaumet, once established by the Prince de Condé, she met them all. Madame Charles Balsan, Jacques' great-aunt, presided in lace and black. She offered Consuelo a golden heirloom box. We loved him too, she seemed to say. And now we love you. Later, Consuelo wrote her a letter of thanks. The matriarch read it aloud to the family. It was, she recalled, a moment of true reconciliation. In Paris, she and Jacques made their home near the green lawns of the Champ de Mars. From her window, she watched cavalry officers trot by at dawn. Children played, readers claimed benches. The Seine shimmered, the Eiffel Tower blinked its message to the sky. Their house, designed in 18th century style, was filled with antiques and discoveries from long walks along the quay. Paris life was elegance, but not idleness. Consuelo hosted modest luncheons with literary guests. Edith Wharton visited frequently. She chaired charity events. The British Embassy, once owned by Pauline Borghese, held glittering dinners under Napoleon's gold service. Here, old castes mingled, Bourbon, Bonaparte, Republican. She watched it all with grace and growing understanding. "You know what's strange?" she said to Jacques one evening as they returned from a salon hosted by the Comtesse de Noailles. "I used to think being a duchess was the height of power, but I had no power at all. And now?" he asked, helping her with her coat. "Now I have the only power that matters," she smiled. "The power to choose." In 1926, she was asked to help build a hospital for the middle class, those too proud for charity, too poor for private care. The hilltop site near Suresnes had once belonged to Jean Worth. With Dr. Alexis Carrel and Bernard Flexner, she led the campaign. 360 rooms and a nursing school. Fundraising became fate. Grand Prix dinners, peacock balls, raffles with Fabergé clocks. Musicians clamoured to perform. "I was at your benefit concert," an elderly man in worn clothes told her one afternoon as she inspected the hospital's foundation stones. 40 years ago, I cleaned the stables at Blenheim. You probably don't remember me." She studied his face, weathered like bark. "You're wrong, Mr. Harrison. You had a border collie named Pitch who followed you everywhere." The man's eyes widened. "You remember that?" "I remember everyone who was kind to me," she said. "You let me feed Pitch when no one was looking." He nodded, suddenly shy. "This place you're building, my daughter's expecting her first. They live in 2 rooms, no proper doctor for miles." "She'll have a room here," Consuelo said, touching his arm. "The best care we can give." "Why, though?" he asked. "Why go to all this trouble for people you don't know?" She looked out over the construction site, the men laying foundations in the afternoon sun. "Because I spent half my life as decoration," she said. "I'd rather spend the rest being useful." For many, a Gilded Age socialite possessing a luxurious Parisian mansion and a villa on the Riviera might be more than sufficient. As a former duchess and Vanderbilt heiress, Consuelo was not your garden variety Gilded Age socialite. Having relocated to France, she needed a country place within easy reach of Paris. To that end, in 1922, Jacques and Consuelo purchased and restored Chateau Saint-Georges Motel, an early 17th century manor near Dreux in Normandy. The chateau was a resurrection project. Neglected for decades, its roof leaked, its gardens had surrendered to wilderness, its windows stared blankly into nothing. "It's a disaster," the real estate agent warned, "completely uninhabitable." Jacques laughed. So was Blenheim, and they called that a palace. They worked side by side, hiring local craftsmen, sourcing materials, replanting the gardens. Unlike Blenheim, with its armies of servants and rigid protocols, St. George Motel became a place of creation. "I never knew you could hang curtains," Jacques teased, watching her measure a window. "I never knew I could either," she admitted. "It's delightful to find out." Consuelo continued her charitable endeavours there, establishing a sanatorium for children and founding a hospital nearby. Winston and Clementine Churchill were regular guests. The chateau became their sanctuary, a place where titled guests mixed with artists, where conversation flowed without protocol, where children were welcome at the table. "I've been thinking," she told Jacques one evening as they sat in the garden, watching the sun melt into the horizon. Bees hummed in the lavender, the air smelled of wild thyme and warm stone. "A dangerous pastime," he teased. "I want to start a summer camp here, for city children who never see trees or clean air." He nodded. "How many?" 50 to start. We'll need to build cabins, hire teachers." "Done," he said simply. She looked at him, this man who never questioned her dreams, only asked how to help realize them. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he smiled. "I trust your heart." That summer, the grounds of St. Georges Motel filled with laughter as children from Paris tenements discovered forests and streams, ate fresh food, slept under quiet skies. Consuelo walked among them, not as a duchess or a Vanderbilt, but as someone who remembered what it meant to be caged, to be hungry for space and sky. A small boy with hollow cheeks tugged at her skirt one afternoon. "Madame Balsan, is it true you used to live in a castle bigger than this whole place?" "I did," she nodded. "Were you happy there?" She considered his question, its directness, its innocence. "No," she said simply, "I wasn't." "But you're rich," he frowned. "My papa says rich people are always happy." She knelt to his level, met his eyes. Being rich isn't the same as being free, and only free people have a chance at happiness. He nodded solemnly, though she knew he didn't fully understand. Not yet, but he would remember her words someday when they might matter. She loved Paris most in the spring. Acacia blossoms opened toward the light. The Seine shimmered. Old men fished without expectation. The world, for a time, appeared content. But outside the salons and sun-drenched afternoons, shadows were lengthening. France was restless. The strikes grew louder, the workers more defiant. Though she did not fear them, she could feel something shifting, something solemn gathering on the horizon. In the summer of 1930, they began building a villa at Aisy-sur-Mer, collaborating with Achille Duchesne, a landscape architect who had designed the water gardens at Blenheim Palace. Consuelo and Jacques both took an active role in the design. Inspired by the 11th century convent of Le Thoronay, the building was a monastery with a cloister used as a winter garden, bell tower, and chapel. Furniture was shipped from Crowhurst to help furnish the home. There were petit-point chairs fit for kings, but one sat in them unmolested, she later described in her memoir. Beautiful Isfahan rugs covered the floors, and the house was gay with flowers. Unlike Blenheim, where every object was a statement of status, every room a stage for display, Villa A's was designed for living. Windows opened to the Mediterranean, terraces invited long lunches, books lay casually open, waiting to be continued. It was here, watching the sea change from turquoise to indigo, that Consuelo began to write her memoirs. Not for publication, not yet, but for understanding. "I've been wondering," Jacques said one evening as they sat on the terrace, the sunset turning the water to hammered gold, "why you never talk about your years at Blenheim." She sipped her wine, watched a sailboat tack against the wind. "Some wounds," she said carefully, "are best left undisturbed. Or perhaps," he suggested, "some need air to heal properly." She considered this. "Are you suggesting I write it down?" "I'm suggesting you own it," he said. "All of it. The girl who was sold, the woman who survived, the duchess who walked away. It's a story worth telling. Who would want to read about a poor little rich girl? She smiled ruefully. Anyone who's ever felt trapped, he said. Anyone who's ever wanted to be more than what others decided they should be. The next day she began writing in earnest. Not just notes, but a narrative. Her narrative. The years passed in a rhythm of their own making. Winters at Villa A's, spring and autumn at St. George Motel, summers travelling or hosting house parties. Their circle widened, then contracted, then widened again. Artists, diplomats, writers, musicians. Charlie Chaplin visited, charming everyone. The Maharaja of Kapurthala brought stories of India that made her see her own time there through new eyes. They were not untouched by the crash of 1929. Investments suffered, economies tightened, but unlike many of their friends, they did not panic. "We have more than enough," Jacques assured her, "and what we have, we share." The sanatorium remained open. The hospital continued its work. Children still came to St. George Motel each summer, now with thinner faces, shabbier clothes, greater need. In 1933, Alva died in her sleep. There were no trumpets, no suffrage banners, just a short notice, a modest funeral at the American Cathedral in Paris. Maggie Stevenson arranged it with tact and devotion. Consuelo wore black. She did not cry. She did not need to. The grief had come years earlier, in the partings that had hurt more than any passing. She sat near the front. The lilies on the casket were pale and unscented. The marble beneath her shoes was colder than it should have been. No one called Alva a villain that day, nor a heroine, only a name, a date, a pause. But Consuelo felt it, not just the loss of a mother, but the end of the scaffolding on which her life had once been built. The last great tower of her childhood had fallen, and she was still standing. "She taught me strength," she would later write, "but it was forgiveness that let me carry it." They returned to St. George Motel after the funeral. Jacques poured brandy, built a fire, though the evening was mild. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind only possible between people who have nothing left to hide. "Do you think," she asked finally, "she ever regretted what she did, forcing me to marry Sonny?" Jacques considered his answer carefully. "I think," he said, "she regretted her methods but not her goals. She wanted you to have power, security, position. She didn't understand that those things without choice are just another form of prison." Consuelo nodded, watching the flames dance. "She helped with the annulment. That was something." "That was everything," Jacques corrected gently. "It was her way of giving you back what she had taken." They sat together as the fire burned low. Outside, an owl called across the parkland. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds held space for what had been lost and what had been found. The shadow of another war began to stretch across Europe, first as whispers, then as headlines, then as marching boots and raised voices. They read the papers, listened to the radio, watched the changing faces around them. Friends returning to Germany suddenly stopped writing. Czech acquaintances spoke in worried tones. Polish diplomats cancelled visits. In Paris, refugees began arriving. First a trickle, then a stream. Writers, artists, musicians, scientists, Jews, socialists, homosexuals, intellectuals, anyone deemed undesirable by the new order rising in the East. Consuelo and Jacques opened their doors, not just to the titled or famous, but to anyone who needed shelter, a meal, a moment to breathe before continuing the journey. "We can't save everyone," Jacques warned as their guest list grew. "No," she agreed, "but we can save some, and that's not nothing." Their work at the hospital took on new urgency. They added beds, trained more nurses, stockpiled medical supplies. Without speaking it aloud, they prepared for what they both knew was coming. In the summer of 1939, they spent long days at St. George Motel. The children's camp continued, though many parents kept their children close that year. Those who came were thinner, quieter, their eyes older than their years. Winston Churchill visited in August, painting the chateau in the summer light. His brush strokes were broad, confident, capturing the golden stone against the green backdrop. But his conversation was grave. "It's coming," he told them over dinner on the terrace. "Not a question of if, only when." "And England?" Jacques asked. "Will fight," Churchill said simply.